Welcome back to Hardware Unboxed, part 3 of the monthly Q&A, brought to you by the LTT store. No, just kidding, it isn't. Yeah, we had enough questions for a part 3, so here we are. We're back to answer the rest of the questions to make a part 3. That's pretty good, isn't it?
I think so.
So before we do, though, this episode was brought to you by... Today's sponsor spot is brought to you by Thermal Grizzly and their new 12th gen CPU contact frame by DeBauer. It's well known that the integrated loading mechanism, or ILM, of the LJ1700 sockets bends 12th gen CPUs, leading to an uneven contact surface that reduces cooling performance. Solving this issue, the contact frame replaces the ILM, allowing for a much more even contact with the CPU's IHS and the base of your cooler, which in turn reduces operating temperatures. Installation's quick and easy, and thanks to the use of anodized aluminium, the contact frame is non-conductive. And then, for those of you who wish to further maximize contact, Thermal Grizzly now offers an optional lapping tool, so for more information, please check the link in the video description. Alright, how much is the Nvidia Premium worth it if both their cards have the same performance, like the 6800 XT versus the RTX 3080? Pretty sure we asked you guys this.
We did.
It was a minimum, it was at least rather 10%.
I think people wanted the AMD GPU, because we asked it the reverse ways, how much cheaper does an AMD GPU need to be, I believe. We'll put up the poll for people to have a look at.
Small difference there in percentages, but essentially the same thing.
Essentially the same thing. I think most people were sort of in the range of 10 to 20% in terms of how much cheaper the AMD product needs to be. And I think that sounds pretty fair to me, considering where the feature set and things go. Now, I think it would change a bit if AMD was able to match ray tracing performance. So this would not obviously apply to the 6800 XT versus 3080 comparison. But I think that gap would narrow a bit if future generations we had ray tracing performance that was the same for both generations, and then it wasn't just rasterization parity. Because especially with the 4090, ray tracing really is starting to become viable, very usable. The 4090 is a great ray tracing card. So yeah, I think it would close up a bit there. And that would be, obviously, Nvidia still has, feature advantages. But, for now, I think what people have sort of come up with in the poll seems to be pretty spot on, in my opinion. Certainly things like, DLSS versus FSR, Nvidia is still definitively in the lead with DLSS. It's supported in more games and it works better. They've got the advantage of reflex. Now, you can mitigate input lag with other methods on AMD GPUs, but reflex is a really easy technique. And I think with this generation, it's probably going to be worth revisiting encoding performance as well, just to sort of have a look at how does Ada Lovelace compare to RDNA 3 to even Arc GPUs for things like that. But at least what we know at the moment, I think NVIDIA's feature advantage is still there and it's still worth paying a premium for. So, yeah.
Okay, leading on from that one, how do you test so many games in such a short time? It's crazy how you're able to benchmark so many games. Well, the secret is it's not a short time. So when I updated all the RTX 4090 data for the day one 13th gen reviews, I started doing that about 2 weeks out. So really we look at what's on the schedule, what's coming up, and I don't wait till those CPUs arrive, benchmark them, and then benchmark whatever CPUs I can in time for comparison. I work out the games, the test configuration, and I start testing for all the comparative data, usually weeks, if not at minimum a week in advance. And that way I have all of that data. So we have 10 to 20 CPUs for comparison already lined up. The new stuff arrives, and then it's just a matter of just testing, Well, we only usually do one CPU at a time. So get the one CPU tested up, spend a couple of days on that, and there you go. So it's a much easier way of doing it. For the 50 game benchmarks and stuff like that, generally, again, that's weeks of testing. So I'll do that on the side. I'll be working on other content. I mean, we've only been doing about 2 videos each a week this year on average. Yep. There's a lot of time, and I've got a full-time editor now, so he takes care of the editing and that, so that frees me up for more benchmarking. But yeah, it's just a lot of time, a lot of hours.
Yeah, and a lot of multitasking as well. Like a lot of the time that we're benchmarking things across not just games, anything that requires testing and that sort of benchmarking, it is possible to do other things at the same time. Sometimes, games have to be updated. You'll be doing something else at that time. Yeah. Or you're, in between slotting in things and doing things, you're going to be doing other things, especially productivity testing. Often that's click a button, wait.
For the CPU,
10
that's when I
minutes.
script.
Yeah. So
Yep.
same with monitor testing. It's like click a button, wait for the results to be captured, enter them into a spreadsheet. There is time while that's happening to be working on something else. And you as well, you often are like dual wielding test systems.
That's right. I was about to say, so we have highly optimized the process. There's not a minute where we're not doing something throughout the day when I'm benchmarking. So I've always got two primary test systems. One may be they might both be looking at GPUs, CPUs, whatever. But I'll have one either side of me. I don't know if we've shown that on the main channel, but there's some BTS content showing that process. But basically, there's always two test systems at minimum running. And I'll do the benchmark passes on that one, which logs the data to my computer. And then while that game's shutting down, I'm launching another game, I'll go to this one and that'll log the data to a separate folder on my computer. And that allows me to just I'm not waiting for a game to load. I'm not waiting for a game to update. I'm not waiting for a splash screen. I'm just like, it's just go the whole time. VRM thermal testing, I've just bought 3 really expensive separate digital thermometer systems. So I'll have them. I'm hoping to test 2 platforms at the same time. So like B650 and X670 simultaneously.
Yep.
So
and you've never done that before.
I haven't. I've
only been able to do one.
I've only been able to because the thing I use is $800. So we sort of bought one of those and did that. So I just bought 2 more. So I'm hoping to have at minimum 2 going, but I could do up to 3 simultaneously. And I've got all the cases and hardware and all that to do that. And
yep.
There's always a lot of testing being done at the same time and basically no downtime, which is how we've managed to get as much done as we do. But if the process wasn't highly optimized and worked out over multiple years of the best ways to go about things, we would be a lot slower at getting the content done.
Yeah, whole lessons that we've learned over the years about how to improve those sorts of things. And certainly, you've built a new studio here.
All the upgrades we've had has helped.
Even things like down to like desk setups and layouts and having it all dialed in exactly how we want it and how we need it for testing all helps. Like all that stuff contributes to making efficient stuff. And it might sound crazy to be like, our desk helps us benchmark things, but it does.
Optimizing every step really makes a big difference. And you've just had a big optimization with your new studio.
Nice.
So Tim's moved in and obviously they're still set up. I mean, I'm still setting
You've just built a new desk over there for more testing.
But a big upgrade for Tim. So Tim will be churning out more content than ever shortly. So that'll be good.
Yeah. Okay, Steve, being the benchmark king.
Oh, okay.
You have discussed...
Not self-proclaimed, by the way. But
not self-proclaimed, sure. You have discussed automation in an old Q&A before. Recently, Linus Tech Tips announced Markbench. So what are your thoughts? Are you planning to improve your automation processes in the future? Tell us details, please. We are curious.
Okay. Well, firstly, that reminds me, these are the LTT screwdrivers. And no, we haven't been paid to put them here. We've got the GN mod mat here and the screwdrivers because we will be building a PC live after recording this. So that's why
before you see this video.
But before you see this video.
So too late.
So yeah, exactly. Well, you can go back and watch it.
You can go back and watch the stream, but
in case anyone, this is not sponsorship related. So getting that out of the way, now addressing the question. Markbench. So interesting project for sure. I don't know too much about it. So haven't spoken to Linus or asked any questions. It was sort of, I was just going to wait and see, when it comes out, how useful it is to us. I have significant doubts and I don't think it's something we would use anyway for a whole host of reasons. We've seen the Linus crew themselves have a lot of benchmarking issues recently in the latest launches. Again, not having a go at them. It's just this stuff is quite complicated and tricky these days. I'm constantly having to be on my toes now when I benchmark. When we load up a game, I have to be really meticulous, go through all of the settings because stuff like DLSS, for reasons I don't quite understand, likes to just randomly turn itself on. We saw Cyberpunk get updated recently and it just enables FSR with random presets now. So non-native rendering is a thing now, but we've seen games where upscaling is enabled by default. Rainbow Six Siege did that for a long time where the resolution scale wasn't 100% for pretty much all of the presets. So my point is there's a lot of things that can catch you out. And when you start automating, editing config files before you load the game, which then can be reset and overridden once the game's loaded due to cloud-based stuff like that, you can end up with funky results. And it honestly causes more headaches and more concern than it's worth, in my opinion. Some bigger concerns for us are For us, Markbench could arrive, well, dead for us because it may only look at canned benchmarks, so built-in benchmarks, which I expect that would be the case, that they would just be benchmarking games that have a built-in benchmark and they'd just be automating that process, which really isn't terribly useful for us. And I'd say a good 70 to 80% of the games we benchmark with, we do custom in-game testing for. So if you can't do that, then it's obviously completely useless to us. But yeah, I think automated benchmarking can be great for productivity stuff, but for games that are often dynamic, updated very regularly, I don't think it's terribly useful. I think you'd spend more time having to weed out bad data or like if you set up an automation process and it goes through like 80% of the games without a problem, and then there's 20% that either crash or don't load or the menu's changed or it causes problems, then having to go back, work out what's caused that problem, either run them again through the automation and find out it doesn't work and then have to do it manually. The amount of time and energy you waste diagnosing that, you might as well have just done it manually to begin with. So that's sort of my take on that one.
Yeah, so I think part of this question might have assumed that we did do automated benchmarking, but just to be clear, we don't. Well, some of the monitor testing is automated, but the majority
specifically game benchmarking, though,
specifically game benchmarking is not automated. And I think in addition to some of the things that you were talking about, I think the biggest concern I have with automated testing at the moment is that games these days, there's so many releases for a start. Games are constantly updated. And that wasn't so much of an issue a decade ago where games were often released, would get like 1 or 2 patches and that was it. These days, even single player titles can be updated many, many times. We've just seen Cyberpunk get major updates a year after its launch. And that means that every single time a game gets updated, you have to update the automation software, or you don't necessarily have to update it, but you have to at least revalidate it so that all the issues you were just talking about,
all the settings change, so that needs to be reconfigured. But then that's a game that if you change the config file before loading, once you load the game, it will almost always rewrite that file.
Yeah.
So,
and that could change after every launch of the game. So this means that with modern games and modern gaming, I think automation software requires a lot of labor to get.
You need a team.
It's a lot of upkeep, right? Yeah. Like you need someone whose dedicated job is making the software effectively, and it creates a lot of concerns over like. So let's say you wanted to test the latest and greatest game that's just come out, and this was just before like a CPU review or something. Now, how long is it going to take you to implement that game into your automation software? Now, it's probably going to take, I don't know, a day, 2 days. Not just to implement it, but then to validate it on multiple hardware to see how the game works. And that's on top of the usual process for benchmarking a game, which is loading the game, finding out how it runs, where's the best place to test, how accurate is the built-in benchmark. So you're doing all that stuff, plus then figuring out how to run it into your automation software. Now, if you're spending 2 days doing that, that's 2 days you could have been spending actually benchmarking the game across a variety of GPUs.
Can be a lot of benchmarking.
So you're kind of having to toss up, okay, what's the benefit of creating the automation? Like what time saving am I getting? And is that offsetting the time cost of making the automation software? And I think over time, at least our brief experiments with it is that it takes more time to create the software than the benefit you get from having it, which is not as like what I'm saying there isn't as true for productivity stuff, which you can automate something like Cinebench, and Cinebench doesn't change, and you're probably going to be using that for many years. You can automate the suite like that, okay, and it's probably going to be a bit easier to integrate new and updated software because the updates are less frequent and so on. But I just think with game testing, it's too dynamic. There's a lot of the issues that you were saying, like, and when you're benchmarking things manually, you get a better feel for where the issues are. Like if you're physically sitting there playing it to do your in-game runs, and you're noticing, the game looks a bit weird, like it's low quality or something's going on. You're getting instant feedback as to what's happening. Like, it's running a bit fast here. Like, is a setting turned down or something?
That's true. Yeah, that's an important part of it as well.
You get that you can sort of troubleshoot as you go, which even testing things like XeSS and so on. Like there are issues like that where I think in Hitman DLSS or something for me wasn't working. I was getting really weird results, and I found out it was some configuration problem. It's like I was getting real-time feedback because every benchmark run I was seeing the results and being like, that's not right. Whereas with automation, you kind of click a button, you go away, you come back, and as you say, then you have to go and look through all the issues.
Yeah,
it becomes very complicated.
That's a really important thing to bring up as well. The amount of times that I have noticed a weird stuttering, and it's been a memory timing that's loaded incorrectly, or some weird problem in the game, and you've been able to diagnose that on the fly, work out what's going on, and solve it, rather than get all of those results and be none the wiser and just punch them into Excel and go, that looks roughly right, I guess, based on nothing.
Yeah.
So, and really, if we thought that this was a viable thing, a viable project, something that would save us a lot of time and energy, allow us either to do more testing, or some sort of benefit, we would have already hired a software developer, a team of software developers. Like, we're in a position where we could do that, and we wouldn't have to wait on Linus and his team to do it. So if we thought that would be a benefit for our internal testing, which we've hired software developers to make automation for you, but yeah, there's no point doing it for the gaming, which is why we haven't done it. So I guess that sort of answers itself, really. Like, we've hired software developers to make stuff for us in the past where it's made sense, but automating game benchmarks, it won't be one of those things.
Yeah, I think its usefulness is likely going to be limited to games that are finished, so they're not
Shadow
updated.
of the Tomb Raider built-in benchmark,
So Shadow of the
which we don't
Tomb
run
Raider,
anyway.
Watch Dogs Legion, those sort of titles where that haven't been updated for a while. The game is what it is, and games that have built-in benchmarks. So those two combinations of things, you're probably going to be able to automate it, especially those games that also produce output files or are very easy to configure. That's where I think automation will work, but I think it will limit testing of modern games, multiplayer games. Those sorts of things are going to be very difficult to test through automation, and I don't think, I just don't think those games are going to be able to be integrated. Something like Spider-Man Remastered that both of us have just been testing recently has no built-in benchmark. It's a new game. It's been updated many times since launch. That would be extremely difficult to automate.
Alrighty, Tim, a topic you've covered in a bit of detail that I actually haven't got to talk about this at all yet.
Yeah, I don't think so.
Now that Nvidia unlaunched the 4080 12GB, do you think they really did so because of the extensive backlash, or is it because of AMD? So removing the 12GB model removes an obviously weak card from the lineup and also gives them room to lower the price of the 16GB model, which they are conveniently making available for purchase after AMD's November 3rd event, giving themselves some time to react. So
I think there's a few assumptions in that question. I don't think Nvidia's going to drop the price of the 4080 16GB. They've announced that for $1,200.
No, it gives them the room to do so, though, but I don't think they will.
They could, but usually there's a bit of embarrassment involved with dropping the price either before or closely after launch. And considering the 4090 sold pretty well by all accounts, I don't think there's a lot of incentive to drop the price.
No, but I mean, there's a lot of embarrassment with
unlaunched. Yeah, but and also, I think part of that question says something like the obviously weak 4080 12GB. I don't know whether that's true either. It could still, depending on what they actually relaunch it as, it could have been a good product. Who knows?
I think at the price point, based on the benchmarks Nvidia sort of released to test the waters, it was not well received.
Didn't look amazing.
So I think that's what those comments are based on.
Yeah.
Look, again, it's all speculation, and I think this question should be a bit easier to answer in a few months' time with a bit more certainty. Once we see what AMD does, it'll be quite I guess we knew the specs. We once we get the 4080 and the part below and that, we actually see if there's a similar spec GPU, how that performs. We could then work out what the cost per frame and what the value offering would have been for that particular part. And if it gets absolutely slaughtered by something AMD launches, then it's like, well, there's whether that was the motivation or not, there's definitely evidence there that would have been a really bad product.
Yeah, I don't think it's so much Nvidia worried too much about AMD competition because they're still a very dominant player. So how much you would take into that account, I'm not sure. I think they have shown over the years, though, and this is something that I talked about in my news video about this, was that Nvidia doesn't like criticism in reviews all that much, in terms of even if the product is well received and people are talking about it in positive light, if you mention something that you didn't like about the product, Nvidia tends not to like that feedback too much. I'm not saying they're going to go out and try and do all sorts of dodgy stuff, but they're going to maybe have a few words like, oh, I want a bit more information about what you said about that topic or whatever in videos. It's pretty common for Nvidia to do that. And I think there was this sort of obvious bubbling away at the surface of reviewers are going to destroy them for the 4080 12 gigabyte, either because it was too expensive or because it was named stupidly, or there was some reason there that you could sort of feel the itching of most reviewers of like, we're just waiting for this, and there's a lot of ammunition there.
Well, we'd already said publicly in our last Q&A series that we were going to tear it a new one.
And a lot of other reviewers did as well.
So that was already pretty much made clear.
I think Nvidia very much likes everything to appear as good as possible. Mm-hmm. So they want every feature, everything that they announce to be well received, which is fair enough.
Brand image type deal.
Companies like to do that. So, even when I was just talking about Nvidia not taking, some parts of negative feedback as well as other times, that's very common across a lot of companies. You often publish a positive review and then you mention one small negative thing and you get a phone call or whatever. That's pretty standard. Mm-hmm. But I think Nvidia was really conscious of that with this particular launch, more so than usual. And so I think that the brand image thing is a legitimate concern. I don't think it's just they have the opportunity to reposition the card up against AMD. Certainly that's an advantage for them, but I think they genuinely were concerned about feedback. Mm-hmm. So again, this is all just speculation. It's not like I'm sitting here being like, I've talked to Nvidia employee who made this decision and that was the reason. But just knowing how they've operated as a company over the entire time that we've been doing this, I think that they would not have been happy with the reviews as they were probably going to be.
Do you think AMD should have launched B650 alongside X670? Why do you think they spread everything out like this? Ideally, they should have launched it because it'd be good to know what all the options are, and we can do a better job of the reviews. If we have all that information, the more information, the better. Why do I think they spread it out, though? I think it's probably a few reasons. One, it's less work for them initially, getting a GSA code and everything worked out for two different chipsets on the one platform when there's already... it seems like it's a bit of a dash to the finish line just to get X670 working, so that there's probably some reasons there. Also, maybe it's an agreement they have with motherboard makers, or not necessarily an agreement, but just what's viable, what's realistic, because Intel does the same thing. They don't necessarily, at least not always, especially for major releases, new platform introductions, they don't dump just here's all of our chipsets in one go. They often sort of drip feed them out. When motherboard makers are releasing 4 to a dozen or more motherboards on a particular chipset, then doubling that workload and getting all the marketing materials and everything ready for 2 separate chipsets, probably giving them a bit of a breather in between. I'm just speculating, but I think it's probably just a logistics management type thing of making it a bit smoother. And if there's any major problems straight out of the gate with boosting or whatever, they can address that a bit quicker.
Yeah, I think that's pretty much the main reason. They were launched close enough that I don't think it was too much like an early adopter thing, people rushing out to buy X series boards. People knew B series was coming. They could have waited.
Yeah, that's right.
So I think, it's more about, the BIOS related stuff. Mm-hmm. Why do AMD and Intel have such big boxes for their SKUs when there is no box cooler? 95% of the box is empty. They even put a plastic shell so the box is not just too destroyed at arrival. It's an interesting, unique question. I don't think I've seen this one before.
Tim, as luck would have it, I have a couple of visual aids. To help with the visual aids are always very handy. So this here is a brand new, unopened, Core i9 13900K CPU, and this will be going in a system that we're about to build once we finish recording the Q&As. As you say, that it'll be online.
Yep.
Prior. Anywho, box. CPU. So that's what the person who left that comment's talking about. This is all you get effectively in this box. And then there's a whole heap of other stuff. And then AMD CPU is somewhat similar to this in terms of dimensions. It's featured there inside the box. And the AMD CPU, which that's the Intel one, but the AMD one is that's all you get in the box as well. So quite a large box.
Yep.
For quite a small CPU. So why do they do that, Tim? Is it just
Well,
marketing?
there's obvious marketing reasons. I mean, these boxes are obviously very nicely constructed. This new Ryzen 7000 design is nicer than the previous generations. So they've got a big foam block in there.
So the AMD ones. Sorry to interrupt you. Go on.
And then you can see on the side of this Intel Core i9 box that there's like this wafer sort of looking thing in the center. It's hard to see on this side
Piece
profile,
of plastic.
but there is certainly, you know, they're designing these boxes to look really nice and give you the feel like you've spent a lot of money on these processors. And let's be honest, this is a Core i9 part. It's like $650 US
It's
or
over
whatever.
$1,000 Australian dollars for that.
The Ryzen 9 over there, again, very similar. It's like $700. You wouldn't. While it does make more environmental sense to have a package that's like this big and is tiny and that gives you the CPU, I think they're clearly doing it so that buyers are getting the feel like they've bought a premium product. And I certainly think it makes more sense to make the box the way they have when there's like that nice unboxing experience, as opposed to like the previous Ryzen boxes were very much just a standard box. You flip it open, you see the giant plastic thing in there, and you pull out the little CPU thing. That is a much nicer box design.
So
this is kind of like a silly thing, right?
Yeah, so
You don't care that much, right?
so ethically, this is a poor choice. It's not
Yes.
environmentally friendly.
No.
It's a waste of resources. But who is to blame here? This is what I always find interesting. It's kind of like the clickbait thumbnails on YouTube. Who is to blame for that? Is it do you put the blame squarely on AMD and Intel, or do you put the blame on consumers who are like, oh, big cool looking box, I want that
Yeah.
one?
And people see the unbox, like people on YouTube unbox it, and not just on YouTube.
No,
but
don't stick with blaming the viewers or forget the YouTubers and unboxers. What were you saying?
I was more like, you know, you show your friends, right?
Yeah.
You take a video like, oh, I bought my new Core i9. Here's the package. Here's what I got. Like, look, isn't this so cool? You take a video, you show your friends and stuff. You know, people, that's part of the experience of buying these products now. And while it's, for practical people, it doesn't make a lot of sense. Like you would just buy a tiny, you'd even just buy a tray CPU shipped to you in an envelope. Like that's probably
for all the
fine.
people I've triggered, they should be setting the example by making an environmentally friendly packaged product. But also if they want to make lots of money and be successful, which is really all they're there for, then that's the result, because people are like magpies and like shiny objects.
Yeah, and you can see the evolution of how the boxes did go from super simple things to now elaborate, especially on the Intel side, very elaborate.
They've optimized their
packages,
process.
yeah.
All right, that is going to do it. October Q&A series, donezo.
Awesome.
We are done. So now we can go do some other things. That'll be fun.
Yep.
But hopefully you guys enjoyed it. 20% Club and all that. Thank you very much. Appreciate you. Floatplane, Patreon. Check those out if you want more Hardware Unboxed goodness. Tim's built a new studio. Good little series there. There's an awesome Discord server. Really good community. Live streams. All that stuff. So check it out if you're interested. But if not, perfectly fine. And Tim would like to thank you for watching this video.
I don't know what you wanted there. No idea what was going on.
And Tim would like to
Thank you for watching the video.
see you next time.